Hello, hello, gorgeous humans. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This episode has been here for a few weeks and I knew that it would happen and it's time. So this podcast is around transparency and how transparency is the portal to vulnerability, which is also the portal to connecting through the heart, wholehearted connection and authenticity. And also just going off the back of the last podcast, which was around spiritual coercion and psychosis and things like that, and speaking from the point of view of witnessing generations. And I realized that there was a whole database of information within me that I can pass on to my children, and how that was such a deep desire in me as a child to understand reality. I was looking to my parents, and there were things like, so the context of transparency throughout generations is that there has been social influence, community influence, cultural influence to hide certain truths that are uncomfortable. And like we look at this age appropriate type of a thing, like the age appropriateness of information. And one of the insights that I came back to a lot as a mum was that they're going to ask questions about the things that they're curious about. And that, yes, we can answer those questions with honesty and truth without necessarily gatekeeping what they are capable of understanding. And whilst in some ways this might create some traumas, but what it also does is create a safety. Transparency creates safety within a child's experience because they're picking up on the subtle energies of the parents, especially if you've gone through and I guess there's this aspect of coercion too, which I believe is highly ignorant, and it's not always malicious. And it might feel malicious, and looking back, we can see, oh my gosh, I'd never do that and never do this. And yet there's still ignorance in it because we only ever treat other people to the capacity that we're able to treat ourselves, which is why the onus is on ourselves through self-love. With transparency, what I have found is it helps to negate so much cognitive dissonance. If an individual feels safe to be transparent about their experience, if they feel safe to share vulnerably about the way they experience life, and then that is just held and believed, then that individual starts to feel safe in the place where they are accepted, where their experience is believed. And as a mum, that definitely has looked like oversharing. It definitely has looked like me expressing my perspective a lot. And my children have expressed to me that sometimes they don't feel welcome in the conversation if I go off into my vulnerable, transparent musings. And I was so grateful to receive that feedback. And one of the reasons why I, open that, and that feedback, that transparent feedback, without me getting defensive or trying to make them wrong for that feedback, like that's their lived experience, I was able to then readjust the way I go about it and involve them more in the conversation so as to be understood instead of forcing an understanding. And one of the reasons why I have become so transparent with my children is because I realized there were generations that were not transparent, that, like even around sex and around the sexual nature of humans. Like I went to my wedding night having not really any idea, because I was a virgin, of the whole undergoings of everything. And sex was a topic that was not openly discussed. It was highly, highly demonized in our house, my house growing up. And so I wanted a different approach for my children. So basically that looked like every conversation is welcome at the dinner table. And that looked really silly for a while. It can get silly, but it's also within silliness that we deconstruct beautifully. And realizing that the transparency of our experience, so the cognitive, here's how I'm interpreting my experience, that's the segue to the felt experience, the opening of the vulnerability to create telepathy of hearts, to allow for the language of sharing your inner experience, your feelings with other people. And it's understanding when we start to become transparent about our intentions, about our motivations, we start to create a sense of safety within our own selves too. And we start to realize where we're coercing other people into our perspective, and how coercing other people out of their transparency, so feeling unsafe with other people's transparency, is a reflection of how safe we feel within our own. And transparency is fundamental for authenticity. So realizing that there's this catalyst of our energy, our physical energy, our emotional energy, our mental energy, our desire to live, our will to activate into action. If you've experienced PTSD, it's like becoming so close to our own autonomy to realize the weight of our own impact. It's essential to look at the impact that we have already created, especially in those places where we feel is the most important to us. For me, that was in my family home, the atmosphere that I contribute to the family home as the mom, and that felt overwhelming. And I remember when I had to stop interfering in the relationships that my children had and controlling the atmosphere of the home to make it happy, to make it calm, to make it and it almost, like, instead of allowing it to be what it is and then sitting with that discomfort, saying that it's uncomfortable instead of gaslighting, no, this is fine, this is great. No, this is uncomfortable for me too. And that repair that can happen, the depth of repair that can happen when we are able to hold transparency and able to hold another person's transparency and vulnerability. And it's a wordless thing. We don't have to know the way forward all the time. We don't have to know the next step. Sometimes the next step is sitting in the discomfort together and still choosing each other. And that can look like having a big fight with a teenager. And the energy speaks far louder than the words. So one thing I would do with my teenagers, and I still do, is I open that capacity within me to feel the quantum aspects of the heart that is open to far more information than our cognitive mind, which is so heavily programmed from our past. So it's the somatic, the physical experience, the physical sensations of allowing the discomfort of not connecting and not seeing eye to eye to move through us. Now, I just had an experience this morning with a sister of mine who we were disagreeing on a certain subject. And she said something to me which I thought was just the biggest compliment. And she's like, I said, it's okay that we disagree on this, and she could have become defensive and she didn't. And she's like, Katie, you're one of the only people who I feel safe disagreeing with. Because she knows that it doesn't impact our relationship or the way that I see her, because she feels honestly loved by me. And I remember when she said no to me for the first time and how excited I got because I felt as though she trusted me with her honest experience. And because we've moved through so much of these interpersonal and relational boundaries together, we've got a language with each other, and then there's a trust that underpins that language. It's an energy, and that energy is, hey, I see you. I so trust in your intention, and it's okay that we are at different places in this whole evolutionary thing, because who the frick am I to judge? Who am I to judge? Like, my perspective is limited to my experience, and I honor and respect the experience of my sister. And who am I to judge her? Like, this shit's not easy. and we get to that place by being uncomfortable, by having uncomfortable conversations and not seeing them as confrontational, but seeing them as possibilities to expand our capacity, our insight, our perception, to involve someone else's. And this is where a lot of the emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, it's literally crime control. Like, it's helping us to make real change in the world because of who we influence. You on this self-love journey, you becoming so transparent and validating of your own experience will lead to other people feeling safe in their experience. You don't have to be a hardcore healer or anything. It's just by nature of you interacting with other humans in a transparent way, you create safety. You create a space that maybe they don't have to mask in anymore. There's a calmness that comes across the nervous system when we don't try to impose our standards on others, but we hold within our own experience the priority of our standards. That's energy work. That's far more spiritual work than all the random weird fucking rituals that you'll do, smudge or whatever. No, like saying no and seeing how the other people react, allowing people to say no to you and witnessing what that does within you. This transparency of our personal experience is helping us to regulate our nervous system to be aligned to hold more of our experience. This is channeling life, channeling our soul seed, that part of our divine, our body, which is like the seed in this life. And it's up to us to create the environment for it to thrive, just like we pass that on to our children. We pass our nervous system on to our children. our lovers, our partners, our friends, our family, our co-workers. We can create real change simply by inviting more of ourselves into our lived experience. And it gets to be simpler and gentler. Not comfortable. It's not comfortable. Like, there are a few days where I feel extremely comfortable in this world. But then that's kind of always been the case. It's just that now I'm choosing the discomfort. If I start to feel a block with someone and I speak into it, hey, I'm feeling resistance around this. I'm feeling like a shrinking or a contraction in this topic. Are you open to exploring that with me? And hey, I yelled at my kids again today, and I really didn't want to. And also, I can see why I yelled. All of that is information. It's all data. And the data is it's where we see the mirror the easiest, because we are the ones who put the meaning onto the data of our lives. It means we don't have power. It means we do have power. It means maybe there's too much guilt in what I'm doing and I need more compassion towards myself. It means, oh my gosh, that was an old shadow of not feeling enough. That was an old shadow of being panicked that I'm not going to set boundaries properly for myself. So I push back before I feel abandoned, and there's this element of abandonment which finds place within transparency and vulnerability. We can never feel abandoned if we don't abandon ourselves. And we can also create those spaces where our children don't feel abandoned, whilst also having to move through the world on their own, whilst they are still experiencing the consequences of their own actions, that choice and accountability, cause and effect, helping them to trust themselves to find the answers is one of the best things that we can do, especially when they hit those teenage years and there's that defiance there and your voice is like naturally quieter to them. Our energy is far more important there within those years than just the passivity of allowing anything to happen, because we still have the structure of the family that we're responsible for. So it's allowing them, seeing ways, creating new ways and new possibilities for them to move within their integrity, as well as holding ourselves accountable to our own integrity. And this is done by witnessing transparently. Integrity isn't comfortable. It's not comfortable, but it is peaceful. When we move in integrity, if you believe in a God, and I guess for me, I kind of go to the point of, well, if I get to the next life and God is there, and there's the transparency of the judgment day, right? Watermelon and mint is just like everything. And this is when I come to any big decision, I'm like, okay, if I can witness myself through the eyes of God as the judge, I'll be like, look, dude, you saw the whole thing. You saw my heart. You saw my past. And you also see my willingness to be humble and learn again and try again. And I continue to try again. You see my willingness to align to whatever the highest good is for all involved. And within that, it doesn't justify the actions. It creates a standard for me to move towards. And that standard isn't perfection. That standard is progress. Because as we progress, we're going to learn more. We're not going to know the outcome right now. It's the progress, the process. And so understanding that transparency is part of this process of developing heart connections, developing trust that we can hold ourselves within a lone experience, and we can create safety with others in a shared experience. And this is why we can change the world within our homes. We change our world. And that transparency from generations of not trusting the next generation to move into radical trust of the next generation whilst not having all their answers, and while like majorly deconstructing your own complex trauma. Compassion is more important now than ever. So gentleness is essential. Spaciousness is essential. So allowing things to not be resolved right in the here and now. Holding space for the discomfort of uncertainty and uncertain futures, possibilities. What that does is it helps us to create faith in the unknown. Because there are so many elements that we do not have control over. But if we have faith in the unfolding, faith is knowing that our children can literally leave us and never talk to us again. So sitting with that possibility that my children might not want anything to do with me in the future. I'd still have to have me. So I'd still have to show up in an integrous way, whilst also acknowledging that they have their reasons, and those reasons are also valid to them for why they don't spend time with me or why they don't want to if they were to cut contact. And I look at that shadow because that's what I've created for myself within my own relationship with my parents. I've created space. Why? Because there isn't a safety there for the transparency of my experience. And that's not to blame them. I do believe it's fundamentally from a place of emotional dysregulation, because there was no safe place for them to experience the range of human emotion. And once we can, within our own experience, through our own nervous system and physical body, feel safe or create that resilience within our nervous system to experience the spectrum of human emotion, the full spectrum of it. It's a skill to feel. And it is a superpower because you become so unfuckwithable. You don't get rushed. You're so within your own experience that you allow other people to have their own experience without forcing your view, your perspective, your insight in ways that could feel coercive and unsafe. No doubt there is so much more to be said on this, and yet this is one of the reasons why I stopped using filters and stopped editing, because there's this element of transparency where I can do the professional thing and look professional. I can be in that place of authority around energy work and transmuting these generational patterns into a peace in the presence. I can do all of that. And yet there's also a desire to be seen as I am. because it is in those places as I am, me showing up on social media in a way that's not just prim and proper and perfect, but just the showing up, just the presence of it, me feeling into my own worth, me expressing that I am safe to be seen from all angles, no matter how unflattering that might look. Talking about my own coercion over my children and my journey in unlearning that, because it comes ultimately from me perpetuating the coercion. And I do that within myself. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should this, should that. It creates so much extra noise when there is a simple isness in the business. There's a simple isness. And that is the soul expression. So if we were safe to be fully seen, fully loved, we would never feel abandoned, because we don't abandon ourselves. We see ourselves. We validate our experience. And from there, we choose alignment and attunement with others who are on a similar journey, so that we can create the world of safety within our own world. And then it's just a ripple effect. It's not about exclusion. This is fundamentally about allowing everyone their own experience and then prioritizing your own. Because if you don't prioritize your own, other people are going to prioritize your energy into their experience. And that's where we perpetuate coercion and manipulation. But if we can speak our truth, even if it's scary and we cry, and if we can then, from speaking, exist within our truth, then our energy, from a place of not having energy, can't get up out of bed, we change the narrative of our lives when we're transparent with ourselves. I hope that this has found you in a place of hope. I am sending you so much love. We've got this. We really do. The world is changing, and it's hearts being turned inward to ourselves, our own experience. And then the more we have capacity to hold our own experience, the wellness within us, it will start to bubble over and overflow, because that's just how that happens. When we have ample, we give more. It's a natural process. And then the giving is so without expectation, because we trust our own boundaries. We trust ourselves. We know we're not going to self-abandon. I so believe in you. We've got this.